First up this week is going to be Mars System Reboot by Dave Wilmarth. It is 526 pages, $4.99. It's available on Kindle Unlimited, and here's the author's description. Late 21st century Earth is overcrowded, her natural resources dwindling rapidly. World governments and greedy megacorporations are forced to work together towards a solution. A crowd of 10 humans are sent to Mars aboard Hyperion I to locate a suitable site and establish their first colony. After a months-long flight to the Red Planet, just as they're about to descend to the surface, problems arise. A careless accident kills a crew member, damages the ship, forcing the others to launch early. And that's just the beginning of their troubles. On day one, they learn that magic is real and that the planet, in fact, the entire galaxy, is governed by a complicated and merciless system. Their assimilation into the system makes them enemies and paranoid and powerful powers that be on Earth, and they find themselves cut off. No communications with family, no resupply. They're on their own on a mostly dead world, and nearly every form of life they do encounter is out to kill them. So there we go. This is a Martian kind of type book combined with alien RPG survival mechanics. The story starts off with the first mission to colonize Mars, only like most survival stories, something goes terribly wrong, and the crew has to make an emergency landing on the planet where they find strange stones that initiate them with an alien civilization program that translates into something like an RPG game interface. It really just sets up the way to give the crew cool powers as they work on surviving and grow their base and powers in the face of limited resources and enemies. And that's really a pretty decent summary of what I found to be like mostly the first half of the story. It's like the Martian combined with like an RPG alien interface system. And the first half of it is very much focused on like the survivalist aspects of being stranded on a world, some of the political ramifications of Earth feeling like they're contaminated potentially, and essentially stranding them there and sending on future trips potentially soldiers to murder them so that Earthlings can again colonize this planet, because that's the big mission, is that Earth is overcrowded. They need a new place to live, and so that's what this crew is originally there to set up. The first colonization efforts, with more ships coming after them on a regular basis to gather resources and build structures and stuff. And so that's part of the good first half of the story. After the halfway point, it shifts a little bit into something that's a little more dungeon diving, I guess, a little bit you could say, with the regular intercessions of things going, the storylines tying back to like the ramifications of the political fallout, people in the know, kind of realizing that what's happening on Mars, that there is potential alien civilization that once existed there, or the RPG interface, and kind of those power struggles, which I thought was a really nice break from the main story a little bit, because it does develop into more of a dungeon diving kind of aspect for the main crew that's on Mars. Still very entertaining, great power structure, great system. Lost a little bit of enjoyment once they self-established their survivalist aspects, though. One of the best things about the story, in line with the survivalist aspect of the story, is that the author has no compunction about murdering off characters. There are several that die very early, and there are more that die as the story goes on. And I really like the fact that really amped up the tension in the story. If you, as a reader, know, man, I'm not sure if this character is going to survive. They may or may not. I feel like sometimes it's a dice roll for the author, and I appreciate the author's willingness to do so. That really is in line with like the survival aspects I really liked in the first half of the book. So that combined with like the survival aspects of having a lack of food, oxygen, water, all those really big, like fundamental survivalist threats, really was probably the best thing in the story for me, at least. And then once it expands beyond that into like the monster fights and the other alien entity encounters, I still like the story. It's just I like the survivalist part the best, I think, for me at least. The game mechanics are expanded on, revealed slowly. There's an RPG interface. There's a set of stats, health, mana, reputation, magic spells, classes, and other expected game mechanics. There is also some crafting and enchanting using resources they might on planet or harvest. The alien interface also rewards the crew anytime they do something that further reestablishes a good living environment on Mars, or anything that furthers that aspect of that civilization rebuilding on Mars aspect, which I thought was a nice little twist, because it very much guides the story as to what these characters are doing. Overall, entertaining story. I had a really good time with it. It would probably have been an 8 out of 10 for me, a great story, if it had kept up the survival aspect of it for the entire story. And I understand thematically why that isn't the case. It makes perfect sense within the narrative structure of what's revealed in the story. But for me, I really just like that background tension of like the crew worrying about not just the threats that are going to be on their way from Earth from another space launch, but also just like the daily aspects of like, we have limited resources here. How are we going to make water, make energy that we're going to use for our machines? How are we going to gather resources we need to like actually build a small civilization for us to live? And what are we going to eat? And all that stuff is really provided like a very subtle, constant tension in the story that dissipates at some point a little bit because things get better for them. But again, only dropped my enjoyment the tiniest bit, but again, had a really, really enjoyable time. Still think it's a really good story. So for me, it gets a score of 7.8 out of 10. That's Mars System Reboot with a score of 7.8 out of 10.